Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always excited to dive in.
Well, today we're looking into the world of enemies to lovers movies.
Ah, a classic.
Yeah, and specifically for our listeners who love those strong female leads, those characters who just defy
Yeah,
expectations.
I like where this is going.
Right. So, we've been hearing a lot about Culpa Mia, Through My Window, and The Tearsmith.
Ooh, those are good ones.
And, all of those movies seem to have really captivated so many people. And our listener wants to know what else is out there.
Makes sense. They've got great taste. Those movies are all about forbidden romance, right? The thrill of the unexpected, the slow burn. Who doesn't love that?
Exactly. I mean, culpa mia, the whole step-sibling thing,
Yeah.
that definitely adds an extra layer of intensity.
Oh, for sure. Forbidden love taken to a whole new level. It's like the closer the connection, the higher the stakes. And honestly, the pushback from society, it just makes the romance that much more enticing.
Totally. And then you have Through My Window, where, the yearning is just palpable.
Oh, I know, right? It's all about the longing, that feeling of wanting what you can't have, or at least what you think you can't have.
Yeah. And the whole boy next door fantasy, but with a twist,
Yeah.
because he's mysterious, maybe a little dangerous even.
Definitely adds to the appeal. And for a generation that's so used to instant gratification, that slow burn, that anticipation, it's almost like a breath of fresh air.
And then we have The Tearsmith. It's got this dark, almost fairy tale-like vibe. You mentioned it kind of gave you Wednesday and Beetlejuice vibes.
Yeah, it's got that dark, whimsical feel, like a Tim Burton movie, but with romance. It's not your typical love story, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely got something unique going on.
Definitely. I mean, remember that scene in the Galaxy classroom? Visually stunning, right? But also there's this underlying darkness, this hint of danger that just draws you in.
Almost like they're taking the forbidden romance trope and amplifying it. It's larger than life, a little bit dangerous.
Absolutely. It's like a dark fairy tale for the modern age. And I think that darkness resonates with a generation that's growing up in a world that feels, well, pretty uncertain. It's like a way of facing your fears, but in a, fictional, entertaining way.
For sure. And speaking of facing things head on, something that all three of these movies have in common are the strong female leads.
Couldn't agree more.
Right. And that's something that our listener really resonated with. And, they're looking for similar characters. So what do you think it is about these particular films that really showcase that?
Well, I think it's that these women aren't just defined by their relationships. They have their own goals, their own complexities, like Noah in Culpa Mia. She's dealing with a crazy family situation, but she's also determined to be her own person, to follow her own path.
Right. And Raquel in Through My Window, she's not just sitting around waiting for heirs to notice her. She's got her writing, her dreams.
Exactly. They're not just love interests. They're fully formed characters. They make mistakes. They fight for what they want. It's refreshing, especially for young women who are looking for role models who reflect their own experiences.
Absolutely. So knowing that, where do we go from here? How do we find more movies that have that same energy? Forbidden romance, strong female leads, that touch of darkness.
Well, I think we need to start with the classics. The movies that paved the way for this whole enemies to lovers thing. And one that immediately comes to mind is 10 Things I Hate About You.
Such a good one.
Right. Witty, charming, and Kat Stratford. She is the definition of a strong female lead. She does not care what anyone thinks, and she's not afraid to go after what she wants.
She's iconic.
Totally. And the movie itself, it's a classic for a reason. It's funny, it's heartwarming, and it really captures that whole idea of defying expectations, which I think is something that really resonates today.
It does. And then there's The Proposal.
Oh, yeah, Sandra Bullock.
I mean, Margaret Tate, talk about a force of nature.
So true. She's ambitious, she's driven, and she is not afraid to break the rules.
And it's funny because both 10 Things I Hate About You and The Proposal use humor to tackle some pretty serious issues, gender roles, societal expectations.
It's sneaky, right? You're laughing, but then you're also thinking, hey, wait a minute.
Exactly. It's like they're disarming you with a joke and then hitting you with the message. And speaking of movies that can do both, you mentioned you were a fan of Elite.
Oh, big time. At least the first 5 seasons.
The source material said something about it being like a masterclass in teen drama.
Mm.
What is it about Elite that really sets it apart?
It's like a masterclass in how to make a teen drama that you just can't stop watching.
So what makes it so addictive?
I think it's the way they weave the enemies to lovers stuff into this whole web of secrets and betrayals.
Right. You mentioned secrets and betrayals. Do those things kind of fuel the enemies to lovers thing?
Totally, because you've got these characters who are forced to face their prejudices and their desires. And a lot of times the animosity starts because they're from different worlds or they just have clashing personalities. But as things unfold, you realize that there's so much more going on beneath the surface.
So it's not just about the romance.
No, it's about self-discovery. It's about
Mm.
understanding yourself and the people around you.
And it sounds like Elite really isn't afraid to go there,
Yeah.
to get messy and complicated.
Oh, absolutely. It's a show that life is messy, relationships are messy, especially when you're young and trying to figure things out.
Okay, so that brings us to Young Royals.
Another great one.
Yeah, like Elite, it takes place at a school, but this time it's a Swedish boarding school.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about a prince.
Right, Prince Wilhelm. And the show really focuses on his relationship with Simon, who's a scholarship student. They come from completely different worlds, and at first there's this tension, this unease between them.
So it's like that classic forbidden love trope, right? But instead of feuding families, it's duty and tradition that's the obstacle.
Exactly. It's all about the weight of expectations. Can Wilhelm choose love over duty? Can he be with Simon and still be the prince that everyone expects him to be?
And how does that play out in terms of them being enemies, or at least starting out that way?
Well, Simon resents Wilhelm's privilege. He sees the ease with which Wilhelm moves through the world, and Wilhelm, he's drawn to Simon's authenticity, his lack of pretense. So their differences are what initially draw them together, even though those same differences create conflict.
So they challenge each other to grow.
Totally. And ultimately, they learn to see past their differences and appreciate each other for who they truly are.
Now, I have to ask about The Rain.
The rain.
Yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic thriller. Bit of a different vibe.
Toy.
So what is it about this show, with all the, end of the world stuff, that fits into these enemies to lovers theme?
Well, it shows how that trope can work in different genres. Because even though the world is ending, people are still people, right? They still crave connection. They still fall in love.
So it's not just about surviving.
No, it's about surviving with someone. And in a world where you can't trust anyone, finding that one person that you can rely on, that you can connect with, becomes even more important.
So the stakes are higher.
Way higher. You're not just risking your heart, you're risking your life.
And that danger, does it kind of like ramp up the romance?
Definitely. Because when you're constantly on edge, when you're facing life or death situations, you tend to connect more intensely with the people around you.
It's like the apocalypse speeds up the whole falling in love process.
Exactly. And it also adds this whole layer of uncertainty because you never know who's going to betray you, who you can truly trust. So the enemies to lovers thing becomes even more complicated, even more intense.
As like a whole new level of will they, won't they. Okay, so we've got Elite, Young Royals, and The Rain, all pretty intense dramas. But you also mentioned Aşk 101.
Oh, Aşk 101. It's a Turkish show, and it's so cute.
The source material specifically mentioned the feel-good vibes and the cute ending. So how does this show's approach to enemies to lovers differ from, say, Elite?
It's much lighter. It's set in a high school, and it's about this group of misfit kids who are trying to stop their favorite teacher from leaving. And the enemies to lovers stuff comes from their playful banter and their competitive spirit.
So it's more about the journey of friendship and self-discovery, with the romance being kind of like a bonus.
Exactly. It's a feel-good show that reminds you of the power of friendship and the importance of finding your people.
Finding your tribe. Do you think that's another reason why the enemies to lovers thing is so popular, this idea of finding connection in unexpected places?
Totally. Because it's all about seeing past those initial differences and finding common ground. It's about realizing that the person who challenges you, the person who pushes your buttons, might actually be the person you're meant to be with.
It's like that saying, opposites attract, but taken to a whole new level.
Exactly. And Aşk 101 really captures that. It's all about the awkwardness and the excitement of first love, and it's just so heartwarming.
Now, we talked about Elite and Young Royals, which are both set in these prestigious schools. But Aşk 101 focuses on these misfits, these outsiders. Does that change the dynamic of the enemies to lovers trope?
It definitely adds a layer of rebellion, you know? These characters don't fit in with the mainstream, so they find solace in each other. They're bonded by their shared experiences of being underestimated or overlooked.
So their outsider status is what brings them together.
In a way, yeah, they're not bound by the same expectations, the same need to conform, so they can be more authentic, more vulnerable with each other.
And it's in that vulnerability that the real connection happens, right? That's
Absolutely. It's when you let your guard down, when you allow yourself to be seen for who you truly are. That's when the magic happens.
Now, before we get into some modern takes on the enemies to lovers trope, I want to circle back to Ni Una Más.
Ni una más.
Yes. It's a Spanish miniseries, and it deals with some pretty heavy stuff like rape and its aftermath. So how does a show like that, with such a serious subject matter, utilize the enemies to lovers trope?
Ni una más uses it to show the power of female solidarity. The main characters, Marin and Amaya, are both survivors of sexual assault. And at first they're suspicious of each other, even hostile, but as they fight for justice, as they support each other through their trauma, a really powerful bond develops.
So it's not a traditional love story.
No, it's about finding strength and healing in shared experience. It's about finding hope in the darkest of places.
It's a reminder that the enemies to lovers trope isn't just about romance, it's about connection. It's about finding someone who sees you, who understands you, even when you don't understand yourself. And that brings us back to the Tiersmith. We talked about how it blends fantasy, horror, and romance. Would you say this kind of genre bending is something that appeals to a Gen Z audience?
I think it does. I mean, Gen Z, they've grown up with so much content, right? They're looking for something different, something that pushes the boundaries a bit.
So it's not just about the romance.
No, it's about the experience, the visuals, the characters, the world that the story creates. The Tiersmith, it's got that in spades, and it makes you think.
And it's okay if it's a little divisive, right?
Oh, absolutely. Not every story has to be for everyone. And sometimes the stories that challenge us the most are the ones that stay with us the longest.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the more modern takes on enemies to lovers. I know you mentioned The Hating Game, Tonight You're Mine, and Anyone But You. What makes these movies stand out, especially for Gen Z?
Well, I think they reflect how relationships have changed. Like, The Hating Game is all about ambition and competition.
Because they both work in publishing, right?
Yeah, so it's like a classic enemies to lovers story, but set in this fast-paced modern world.
Okay, and what about Tonight You're Mine?
That one has a musical twist. Two musicians who can't stand each other are forced to pretend they're a couple.
So fake relationship.
Yeah.
Always a good trope.
Right. And the music adds this whole other layer of emotion and tension.
And then Anyone But You.
That one's meta. It's about actors who hate each other in real life but have to play lovers on screen. So it's playing with the whole idea of what's real and what's not, especially when it comes to love and attraction. I think Gen Z really appreciates that kind of self-awareness.
They like when a movie knows what it is.
Exactly. It's like they're in on the joke.
Okay, so we've talked about movies that subvert expectations. Are there any that challenge traditional gender roles?
Life as We Know It comes to mind. It's about two people who have to become co-parents after their friends who were a couple die unexpectedly. So it's dealing with grief and responsibility on top of the whole enemies to lovers thing.
So it's about more than just the romance.
Way more. And it shows that men can be just as nurturing and capable as parents as women, which I think is a really important message, especially today.
So it's enemies to lovers, but also a commentary on modern family dynamics.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and what about YA adaptations you mentioned After the Kissing Booth and To All the Boys I've Loved Before?
Oh, those are fun.
What do you think about how they handle the enemies to lovers thing?
Well, they're definitely geared towards a younger audience, so they tend to be a bit lighter, a bit more idealistic. But I think they do a good job of introducing those core themes of attraction and conflict. Like, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, it's so sweet and innocent. It really captures those first love feels.
The fake dating, the secret letters, so much fun.
Right. And then The Kissing Booth, Forbidden Love, First Kisses, all that good stuff.
And After. I know the source material compared it to Culpa and Through My Window.
Yeah.
Do you see those similarities?
Yeah, I do. It's definitely more on the intense side. Lots of drama, lots of passion. Maybe not as nuanced as some of the other movies we talked about, but it definitely captures that feeling of being completely consumed by someone, even if they're not good for you.
So all of these movies and shows, they offer something different, but they all tap into this core idea of enemies becoming lovers. Why do you think this trope is so enduring?
Well, I think it's relatable. We've all had those moments where we've clashed with someone only to find ourselves drawn to them later on. And it's hopeful, you know, it shows that even the most unlikely of pairings can find love.
It's like that saying, love conquers all.
Exactly. And who doesn't love a good love story, especially one that defies expectations?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. We've covered a lot of ground today, from classic films to international sensations and everything in between. Hopefully, our listeners have gotten some great ideas for their next movie night.
Definitely. And if you're feeling inspired, maybe even try writing your own enemies to lovers story.
Until next time, happy watching.